Tampon King gets back in the ring. I speak of former VP nominee Tim Walz. He joined Beto O'Rourke at a Texas town hall last night, and the estrogen levels were enough to give Chuck Norris menstrual cramps.
But I think that, but I can't get past the core fact about Walz, which is he presided over, allowed the biggest city in the state to get burned down.
And seemed to not only allow it, but kind of
he liked
and
it.
Support it, you know?
Well, yeah, did you see the video of his wife saying, I kept the windows open so I could smell the burning rubber from the riots?
I did not see that.
Wow. The wife whose hand he shook.
Oh my God. By the way, I mean, I know it's
let's be
picking on a little thing, but who the hell shakes their wife?
When Greg Gutfeld and Tucker Carlson join forces, it's not just a conversation. It's a high-octane political demolition. This time, their target is Governor Tim Walz, and let's just say, he never saw it coming. With razor-sharp wit, blistering sarcasm, and an arsenal of unfiltered jabs, they didn't just poke holes in his narrative. They blasted it to pieces. Every claim he made was met with a verbal wrecking ball, as Gutfeld's cutting humor, paired with Carlson's relentless logic, left no room for spin. It wasn't a debate. It was a real-time takedown, and Walz was squarely in the crosshair.
Politico lingers on candidates' fingers and defend Walz's wide eyes as they claim beards are for bad guys. Tyler, speaking of beards, and I mean the one on your face, not the one that you hang out with.
Let me just say that Walz and every other governor who did anything like that is a monster, and I think on some level he will be punished for it. But no, I admire what you did enough that I hope I'd be man enough to do it myself. I took minor risks during COVID by pointing out things that seemed true to me, but I didn't do anything that heroic. I think it's absolutely essential. Clearly, we're moving toward an authoritarian state. I think we've already arrived. I think your life is a testament to that.
Greg Gutfeld and Tucker Carlson don't wait for permission to go scorched earth on a politician, especially when the target practically tapes a bullseye to their own back. Enter Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, a man who's made a career out of playing the responsible adult while running the state like a teenager who just discovered the liquor cabinet and lost the key. For Gutfeld and Carlson, this isn't just political commentary, it's a full-contact sport. And with Walz stumbling into the ring, they came ready to spar, mock, and dismantle.
Wait, you lost because you weren't woke enough? That's like telling Joy Behar she's not eating enough Doritos. That's like Jasmine Crockett saying, I gotta black this up. That's like Bud Light saying, hey, you know what? We could use more Dylan Mulvaney.
It's like Governor Walz gift-wrapped a piñata with his own face on it, blindfolded himself, spun in circles, and dared Gutfeld and Carlson to take their best shot. Greg Gutfeld steps in with the swagger of a guy who's been aging a premium batch of sarcasm just for this moment. He doesn't need to dig deep. Walz practically writes the jokes for him. With a few choice words, Gutfeld recasts the governor not as a leader, but as the self-appointed chairman of the Committee for Tired Excuses and Uninspired Spin. It's political theater, and Walz is the unwitting headline.
So I'm the law-abiding grandma that was sentenced to 90 days in jail for opening my business during the shutdowns as a peaceful protest when Minnesota Governor Tim Walz unconstitutionally and illegally shut our businesses down. So my question is, if you were in my situation, would you have done the same thing, or what would you have done?
Well, I flatter myself by imagining I would have done the same thing, because I think what you did is honorable and necessary.
Every blunder, every tone-deaf decision, every headline that sounds like it was ripped from a political parody, Gutfeld wraps it all in a bow of razor-sharp comedy. For a guy seemingly allergic to accountability, Walz makes the perfect punchline, and Gutfeld milks that irony like a lactose-intolerant barista at an oat milk convention. The roast kicks off with a swipe at Walz's version of leadership, locking down Minnesota like it's a maximum security prison, all while handing the keys to rising crime in downtown Minneapolis. It's policy theater at its worst, and Gutfeld's got front row seats and a mix.
Dude, you're an old white guy. And you're right, you are a huge disappointment. I guess hating himself is the first thing he's nailed correctly. Because Walz saying old white men suck isn't a political stance, it's his confession. Walz calling people old and white is like Maxine Waters making fun of someone for shopping at Wigs R Us.
Gutfeld zeroes in on the bizarre theater of a governor who seems to treat hardened criminals like misunderstood slam poets while viewing law-abiding citizens as unruly toddlers in desperate need of a timeout. It's not governance, it's avant-garde performance art masquerading as policy and the public review. 1 star, would not recommend. With surgical sarcasm, Gutfeld tears into Walz's pandemic-era double standards. Picture a DJ at an underground rave, restrictions turned up, down, spun in reverse, and remixed every other hour. Small businesses were shut down with the precision of a debt-collecting mob boss, yet big box stores, wide open. Apparently, viruses knew better than to mess with Walmart. Gutfeld doesn't just point out the inconsistencies, he weaponizes them, turning each contradiction into a punchline that lands like a caffeine-fueled late-night monologue. Then he shifts gears to education, and the gloves come off. Under Walz, Minnesota classrooms have drifted from academics to emotional exploration, trading critical thinking for critical feelings. Reading scores nosedived, math scores dropped faster than Walz's approval ratings, and bureaucracy didn't just grow. It multiplied like rabbits in a spreadsheet. Gutfeld delivers it all with the exasperated energy of a substitute teacher who's finally had enough, and the audience can't help but nod along.
Trump is making it more difficult for women to vote? How so? Math problems? But it's further proof that the most dangerous thing for a leftist is a follow-up question, which is why you never hear any. But I guess questioning elections is okay now. But the best moment came when Walz forgot who he is.
Gutfeld doesn't just challenge the concept of equity in education. He dismantles it with comedic flair, mocking the idea that new math now means 2 + 2 = whatever won't hurt anyone's feelings. Under Walz's policies, it's not about learning, it's about appeasement. Gutfeld quips that the academic bar has been set so low, students now get trophies for simply logging into a Zoom call with their cameras off. The message? Participation over performance, vibes over value. Then Gutfeld shifts gears and the tone sharpens. He dives into Walz's economic playbook, calling it a masterclass in how to scare off prosperity. Under Walz, Minnesota transformed into an economic escape room. Taxes climbing like a cat up a curtain, while businesses fled faster than shoppers at a fire drill. Gutfeld paints a picture of a state so inhospitable to innovation, it felt like Walz mistook failure notifications for achievement badges. The state didn't need policy reform, it needed an exorcist. By the time Gutfeld finishes, Walz doesn't resemble a governor. He resembles a warning label for unchecked mediocrity, wrapped in a flannel shirt and a rehearsed grin. Press conference after press conference, Gutfeld drops punchlines like anvils, sudden, weighty, and impossible to ignore. And just when it feels like the final blow has landed, enter Tucker Carlson, scalpel in hand, ready for round 2.
Tim Walz, exactly.
It started sort of with picking up on just these little lies he would tell. He never was a command sergeant major, despite the fact him, saying that he was. He never attained this rank in the military. Instead, he abandoned his troops and they were deployed to Iraq without him, and he ran for Congress. So I've always felt as a reporter, if someone lies about little things, they're lying about big things.
That's a principle that stands the test of time.
And Minnesota has become, the home of this defund the police movement. It was on the ballot. Minneapolis did not vote to defund the police, but I would say in every way, shape, or form, they defunded the police. You have the Minneapolis Police Department that's lost about 40% of their cops since George Floyd. But instead of being
Minneapolis lost 40% of its cops in 5 years?
Nearly half.
Tucker Carlson doesn't need to raise his voice. His power lies in precision. He dissects political disasters the way a war historian might analyze a battlefield. Cool, deliberate, and with that signature smirk that hints he already knows where the bodies are buried. When he sets his sights on Tim Walz, it's not for the punchlines, it's to uncover the rot beneath the rhetoric. What follows isn't just criticism, it's a masterclass in calmly exposing chaos. He begins with public safety, or, more accurately, public surrender. Under Walz, Minneapolis didn't simply defund the police, it hosted their farewell tour. Carlson paints a vivid picture of a city where criminals didn't hide. They danced the Macarena through downtown intersections. In response, Walz didn't lead. He blinked, passed the mic to activist groups, and hashtags would do the heavy lifting. Carlson doesn't call it a breakdown. He calls it a deliberate retreat, a full-scale abdication of responsibility dressed up as progressive policy. Then comes the pandemic, but Tucker approaches it from a different vector. Where Gutfeld laughs at the absurdity, Carlson stands still in the silence of disbelief. He describes Walz's COVID response like watching someone try to douse a blaze with gasoline. Intentions unclear, execution catastrophic. It's not chaos by accident. It's a blueprint of dysfunction, revealed layer by excruciating layer.
5 years ago this summer, George Floyd, a convicted felon, OD'd on fentanyl outside a convenience store in Minneapolis, and the country changed forever. 5 years later, Tim Walz is still the governor. Keith Ellison is still the attorney general. The cops who were falsely convicted of murdering George Floyd are mostly still in prison. But what happened in Minneapolis itself? Well, it's been wrecked. And no one has said a word about it. But I just wonder about this story in particular. Did he have contact with Walz? Do we know that Walz ever, suppose Walz said, I met this guy ever?
Well, this is what's interesting. We know that he served on a board appointed by Walz. However, I'll say that...
what kind of board was it?
It was a workforce development board.
Tucker Carlson walks viewers through one of the more surreal chapters of Tim Walz's leadership, where churches were padlocked, but liquor stores kept their lights on. In Walz's Minnesota, faith was a public hazard, but vodka? Absolutely essential. Carlson doesn't even have to raise his voice. He just lets the absurdity speak for itself. Then, he zeroes in on the robotic cadence of Walz's press briefings, those bizarre, scripted performances where citizens weren't just informed, they were instructed. What to think, what to fear, when it was safe to step outside. It was less like government and more like a taxpayer-funded adult daycare with Orwellian undertones. Carlson casts Walz as the kind of leader who believes breathing should require a permit, and any pushback must be submitted in triplicate. Every new policy came stamped with an unspoken disclaimer. Just trust us. But Tucker doesn't trust people who wear clip-on empathy and call it leadership. Then, with surgical calm, he shifts to education. Where Gutfeld used satire, Carlson uses precision. He slices through the layers of ideology that Walz's administration wrapped around Minnesota's curriculum. Less reading, more reprogramming. For Carlson, it's not just failure, it's intentional. A quiet campaign to replace knowledge with narrative. He scoffs at the notion that teaching kids to distrust their own history somehow equips them for the future. This isn't leadership, he says, it's bureaucracy in cosplay. Walz isn't a visionary. He's a hall monitor with executive power, clipboard in hand, dutifully enforcing rules passed down from elite echo chambers. And what makes Carlson's critique so sharp isn't fury, it's the smirk. The quiet laughter of someone peeling back Minnesota nice and revealing the soft authoritarianism hiding beneath the fleet.
People misreading Tim's odd greeting. The man of the hour, Tim Walz, brings us our second video of the day, and he's got a very weird way of greeting his wife of 30 years. Roll it.
Carlson almost seems baffled that anyone still takes Tim Walz seriously. Each sentence he delivers is like a scalpel dipped in dry sarcasm, precise, deliberate, and surprisingly surgical. His commentary lands not with bluster, but with the weight of a legal brief disguised as a roast. Nothing is accidental. Carlson dismantles Walz brick by brick, laughing as he exposes the structural rot beneath the political polish. Side by side, Gutfeld and Carlson don't just criticize Walz. They incinerate the myth of competence he's spent years trying to construct. Gutfeld operates like a seasoned stand-up comic with a vendetta, dropping one-liners that sting harder than a policy white paper. Carlson, meanwhile, brings the gravitas of a prosecutor with a highlight reel of contradictions. One brings the comedy club. The other brings the courtroom. And Walz, bless him, he just keeps supplying the punchlines. As the laughter dies down and the smirks hang in the air like cigar smoke after a brawl, a sharper message emerges. You can dress up failure in feel-good language, spin it into polished pressers, and stuff it into sanitized soundbites. But none of that survives the full force of Gutfeld's jabs and Carlson's cross-examination. And just when you think Walz's political eulogy is complete, when the roast has cooled and the crowd catches its breath, Gutfeld reappears like a man who left the party early, only to remember he saved the best punchline for last.
Anniversary. They were married 5 years after Tiananmen Square, and he picked that date because it was a date that they would remember, he and his wife.
What?
Who does that?
Tiananmen Square?
Correct.
The tank crushing the lone protester? That's...
Their wedding anniversary. And they went to China for their honeymoon.
Come on. You're sure he picked the anniversary
They've talked about this
of Tiananmen Square?
Interviews. Yeah, this is in newspapers.
Tiananmen Square was a massacre of peaceful protesters.
I know.
Do you think they picked it to, like, in the memory of those brave souls who died opposing the machine?
They haven't said that.
Oh my God!
Roasting Tim Walz isn't a one-and-done punchline. It's an all-you-can-eat buffet of blunders that keeps replenishing itself like a malfunctioning soda fountain. And Gutfeld. He circles back with that mischievous glint in his eye, the look of a man who just remembered there's cheesecake in the fridge and no one's around to stop him. This time, he zeroes in on Walz's political sleight of hand, the uncanny ability to speak in paragraph after paragraph without actually saying a single definitive thing. Gutfeld compares Walz's speeches to a confetti cannon, colorful, chaotic, and completely devoid of substance. Words flutter, ideas scatter, but nothing ever lands. It's performance without purpose. Then, of course, there's Walz's favorite phrase, "We're following the science." Except, as Gutfeld hilariously points out, it's not real science, it's curated science. The kind that fits neatly on a laminated key card and is delivered by someone in a lab coat who teaches mindfulness on weekends. Every inconvenient policy, curfews, lockdowns, capacity limits was cloaked in the mystical authority of the science, as if chanting it could override logic. Nothing screams compassion quite like telling grandma she can't hug her grandkids on Thanksgiving. But sure, she can wait at the DMV for an hour behind a guy sneezing into his hoodie. Under Walz, Minnesota became the beta test site for every half-cooked climate initiative dreamt up by people whose idea of action is reposting pastel infographics on Instagram. And Gutfeld, he's just getting warmed up.
One of them, Politico says, is like Walz's wide eyes showed his passion and emotional intensity. Can we show that? There is his wide eyes. That humans would widen their eyes to convey that danger is close. What emotion are you getting from that?
Sorry.
Tucker Carlson dives headfirst into Governor Walz's green energy push, peeling back the glossy headlines to reveal what he calls a high-cost, low-yield fantasy. On paper, it was all about sustainability. Solar panels, wind turbines, eco-friendly everything. In practice, it played out like a science fair project gone rogue. Energy bills spiked, power grids buckled at the first sign of stress, and the lights didn't just flicker. They failed. Carlson quips that Walz governs like someone allergic to mirrors, constantly preaching progress, yet refusing to reflect on the chaos left behind. When the grid faltered, Walz didn't take responsibility. He looked to the sky as if nature itself had conspired against him. From there, Carlson unpacks the governor's cozy alliance with public sector unions. While the private sector limped through lockdowns and inflation, government jobs were treated like aristocratic appointments. Immune to consequence, propped up by loyalty rather than merit. He notes that in Walz's Minnesota, job security wasn't earned, it was gifted. Even obscure government boards, one featuring a 7-Eleven manager turned mortuary remains disposal technician, became symbols of the strange, clubby insulation from accountability. Tucker isn't just questioning appointments, he's spotlighting a system built on favors rather than fitness. Then comes the economic domino effect. Small businesses weren't just sidelined, they were steamrolled in the name of equity. While big box retailers flourished under essential status, mom and pop shops were sacrificed on the altar of fairness. And when the economic wreckage became undeniable, Walz didn't reassess. He blamed capitalism, like a playwright accusing the audience of misunderstanding the script. Carlson calls it what it is, improv theater with real-world consequences. Greg Gutfeld swoops in for the final act, shifting the focus to Walz's digital presence, or, as Gutfeld describes it, a masterclass in unintentional comedy. Every tweet, every Facebook post reads like your out-of-touch uncle discovered social media and decided to live tweet a PowerPoint about local zoning laws. It's stiff, staged, and dripping with artificial sincerity. Walz's online persona is less public servant and more political mannequin stuck in a permanent loop of clapping for himself. Carlson closes with chilling clarity. The real tragedy isn't that Walz is malicious. It's that he genuinely believes he's leading well. In his world, intentions matter more than results. Competence is measured by how earnestly you tried, not by whether anyone actually benefited. And when his policies fall flat, it's not the plan that's flawed, it's the world that's unfair. Together, Gutfeld and Carlson don't just mock, they reveal. And in the wreckage of Walz's record, they leave a brutal but necessary reminder. Leadership isn't about optics. It's about being right when it matters most.